Welcome one to my how-to video on creating a targeted resume. I want to start off here with drawing your attention to this article written by Business Insider in 2014, in which they took 30 professional recruiters and examined where their eyes looked at a resume. And what they found was, on average, they looked at a resume for 6 seconds. And as you can see from this heat map, this is where the recruiters looked the most. So the red areas are where everyone looked the most, yellow, a medium amount of time, and then the blue or purple area was just very little. So as you can see, if you've got a big paragraph like this, we tend to read the middle of the paragraph and not so much the left-hand side or the right-hand side. If you look at the example on the left, notice that the resume, the second half of the resume is just this really long section, and there's almost no attention paid to this whatsoever. So that indicates to me that you should do something like the right example instead. So notice that education is all the way to the bottom, but there's a lot of attention paid to that. And that, I think, is because of the section heading. It helps draw the eye to that area, and they were looking for that. Whereas over here, among all this just bland text, it's really difficult to tell where to draw your eye. If you look at the more traditional areas where you have bullet points, notice that all the attention is at the very front of your bullet points. All the attention basically stops halfway through. There's very little to no attention paid to the right side of your bullet points. So what this tells me is that if you have a big paragraph, you want to put the most important content in the middle. And if you have the more traditional bullet points, you want to put your most important content to the left side, basically within the first 5 or 6 words. So that draws us back to the job ad that we annotated in our last video. So at this point, you should have already identified in the job ad what is most important to the potential employer applicants be able to demonstrate they can do in order to obtain an interview. So we did this in our previous video, identifying specialized skills, things that are a lot more difficult to just fake, and then transferable skills, which almost everybody has. So what I'm going to do is, if you look in our Moodle page, under week 3, there is a Word document. Oh, my page is going to look a little differently than yours. Let's see. Look under week 3, and there is a Word document called How to Target Resume to a Specific Job Ad. So if you click that open, that will open up a worksheet for you, and this is what it'll look like. So what you want to do is, in the first column, this is where you identify what the job ad tells you it wants. So job duties, what you'd actually be doing for the job, desired qualifications, and then other things that they want. And so the job duties are probably the most important because they're looking for people who can do the work, who have experience that will be relevant and useful for actually accomplishing the work, and that's those specialized skills. Desired qualifications, you might put transferable skills here, and then other things would be things like willing to travel. And then underneath that, you want to identify, as a result of that information, what you want to emphasize in your targeted resume, what you want to de-emphasize, and what you want to cut completely. So for example, you should already cut high school content. At this point, your college students, they're much more interested in what you've done as an adult or as a young professional, as opposed to what you did when you were a legal adolescent. So they don't need to know that you graduated high school. That is assumed if you were attending college. They don't need to know that you were the captain of your sports team. While that is a nice anecdote for the interview, it's not really something that's going to be directly relevant to the job. And the reason is you only have one page to keep their attention. And so to target, you want to make sure that everything in your resume, every single item, directly speaks to something they are looking for. There shouldn't be anything in there just because. So you only have one page. And so if I was to take your resume without looking at the job ad, I should be able to tell pretty clearly based off of what was emphasized what kind of job you're applying for. Okay, so that's the real test. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put our job ad and our worksheet side by side so that I can transfer over some information. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is transfer over our specialized skills, the things that were completely necessary to performing the job. And then I'm going to transfer over our transferable skills. Okay. All right, so this tells me what I need to focus on. And as you look through here, you want to identify keywords or phrases that you want to reuse in your resume. Like I said, they're looking at your resume for 6 seconds. And so regardless of whether it is a actual person looking at your resume or a software program, they're going to be looking for keywords such as billing and receivables, analysis or analyze, budgeting. So you want to go through here and identify keywords. Um, so my keywords would certainly have to do with analyzing. They mention that several times. But also, they want you to be able to determine areas of improvement. So I want to draw attention to that. I want to draw attention to billing and receivables, budgeting and forecasting, and then something about policies. So these might be the words that I want to emphasize in my resume and put in the first half of my bullet points somewhere, especially if you can make them the active verbs like analyzed. Okay, so once I've identified key words and phrases like Excel, I'm definitely going to want to draw attention to that because it says specifically Excel. So in the details as I'm talking about what I've analyzed, I might try to throw in analyzed budgets using Excel and throw that detail in there. So if it's a quality over here on the right hand side and desired qualifications or other, you can throw these details in here like written and oral communication skills as you are talking about these more specialized experiences. Okay, you might take one specific thing over here, like excellent presentation skills. So I might make one bullet point about my presentation skills. But for the most part, I would want to integrate these transferable skills into when I'm talking about these more specialized moments. Okay, so definitely cut anything from high school. The one exception I would put on this is one student had founded his own business while he was in high school and he ran it, and it was very relevant to the kinds of jobs he was looking for. So that was the one exception that I've made as in my history of advising students on resumes, because in that case, it wasn't that he was a high school student, it was just that he was a business owner. And so that definitely, it didn't really matter when that happened. Okay, so the things I want to emphasize are this content. I want to not necessarily focus entirely on these items, but I want some minor details about these things. So definitely want to emphasize this stuff. So what you would put in these boxes is your experiences. So you might, if this is your very first resume, you might list all of your experiences here from education. So if you wanted to, let's say you don't have a lot of work experience or internships, or maybe you don't have any, you can talk about specialized classes and high-end projects you created. And so I can talk about how you would design that in my next video on visual design. But you can have a couple of specialized classes where you talk about a specific project you did that might be able to show off your an analysis or accounting skills or something like that. So work, That could be internships, part-time, full-time, volunteering, extracurricular activities, stuff like that. But so you can make a list of all of your experiences, and then you would only put those experiences in this box that are directly relevant to what's above it. So what is directly relevant to these red items here? If it's not relevant to these items up here, you don't want to put them in there because your resume, you only have one page to make a good impression, and so you want to make your content count. And then anything that kind of speaks to this, you would put your experiences over here. Okay. If this is not your first resume and you are kind of taking your general resume to target that, I would take a look at all of your resume and I would highlight things that do not directly speak to this content. So that you know to either reduce the amount of time that you talk about it, put it more on the right-hand side of your bullet points or lower on your resume, and then put the more important things in those emphasis positions. So emphasis positions of our resume include, so this is how you can emphasize content. The first way, the easiest way, is to have section headings that draw attention to it. So instead of just saying experience, you can say analysis experience. And so you can get that keyword into your section heading. If they're looking for, they mentioned collaboration a couple of times in the job ad, so you could say collaboration experience or team experience or something like that. Other than that, so that's the first way that you can emphasize it is by having different categories of experience. The next thing that you can do is making sure that the content is higher up on the page. So if you have a couple categories of experience, you want to put the experience section that is most relevant first. So I would definitely put analytical experience before the section on collaboration. This also applies for within your bullet points. So which bullet point you put first should be the most important bullet point because they are likely to stop reading, especially if you have more than 3 bullet points. So make sure that your very first bullet point is the most important one. Your second bullet point is the second most important one. So that's the second way that you can emphasize information is by putting the most important content first, because in business writing, they don't have to read your entire document in general. So we want to make sure we get our strongest points up front. The other way that we can emphasize information we learned from the heat map, you want to make the first 5 or 6 words the most important words. So these would be the key words and phrases that you picked out of the job ad. You would want them to appear somewhere no farther than the middle of the line. Okay. So those are different ways that you can emphasize information, and try to avoid having an entire page or a third of your page be an entire section. We notice that people stop reading the really long section. So this is a really good kind of length of sections. Okay, so other ways that you can de-emphasize information. So if you wanted to mention Excel skills, you would put Excel in the latter half of your bullet point paragraph. Okay, so you put your minor points over here on the right, your specialized skills over here on the left. Other ways that you can emphasize a skill is by making it an active verb. So helped is not a great active verb to start on, especially since this is the very first bullet point. So you'd want to put like the word analyzed up here, or budgeted, or something that is more clear. So the best active verbs are the ones that I can get an idea of exactly what you did just by that one word. So I don't know what helped is going to lead to, but I can definitely have an idea of what analyzed is going to lead to. And since that is one of my potential employers' most important values for this job, that will motivate them to read on maybe a little farther. Okay, so if you can put those self-explanatory active verbs up front in at least the first two, that will motivate them to read that line a little bit more. Okay. So other things that will allow you to emphasize information is just brevity. So spending less time on less important things and more time on the more important things. So having more specific details about the specialized skills that they thought was most important. Spending less time on those kind of minor transferable skills. And while we're on the topic of brevity, you really should try to keep each of your bullet points to one-liners. No one's going to read that second line. So if this bullet point, as you can see, continues onto a second line, they're not actually going to read that. And so you might as well try to find a way to break this up into 2 bullet points instead of having one really long one, okay? So you don't want it to be so short that it doesn't look like you have much detail. So you want it to go past this halfway mark, but you don't want it to go much beyond here. Okay, so that's a pretty good stopping point. And certainly try to keep it to one-liners because they're not going to read more than that. Okay, so concision is really important. Notice that these are not full sentences, so there's no periods. You start with an active verb as opposed to the subject, and all of these are ways to get the reader directly to the action of what you did. That's what they want to know. They want to know what you did. So don't fluff up these descriptors with a lot of excess detail. Just say directly and clearly and with specific detail what you did. That is all they care about, is what you did. And if they can't tell what you did based off of these descriptions, they're not going to want to talk to you about your experiences. Okay, so to review, pick out keywords from the job ad that you want to highlight and emphasize. Emphasize your experiences that relate to those keywords. De-emphasize minor points. Cut things from high school. Keep your lines concise. And your active verbs, make them self-evident of what that line is going to be about. Keep your most important content on the right side of your bullet points and higher to the top, and your less important details to the right of your bullet points. All right, so I hope that this how-to guide was useful. I hope you'll check out my next one on how to create a visually appealing or the visual design of a traditional resume. Thank you very much, and good luck.